Yep, I got you. Sure. Yeah, we're trying to, figure that out this year. I would say, maybe 5 or 6 for the year between me and then another writer will go to about, we'll probably cover 10 between the two of us. But I was out at Wells Fargo last week.
Coming up this morning on Find the Fairway Live, so much talk about Rory McIlroy. Really in a slump, is he? We're going to go over the stats of why that might not actually be the case. And will Rory actually win another major? Another major coming up next week, the PGA Championship. Jordan Spieth dealing with injuries. He's out this week. Will he be back at Oak Hill? And who should we be looking at for the 2023 PGA Championship? And of course, this week, got to talk AT&T Byron Nelson with Scotty Scheffler, a massive favorite at plus 450. Will Gray from the PGA Tour Golfbet brand is here to break all of it down with us. Will, you have such a new adventure going on in your life. You're so busy. I'm glad I had time to get you on here because I want to talk all about this Golfbet brand that the PGA Tour has going on.
Yeah, Chris, good to be with you and glad we had a chance to connect. It's an exciting time to be, at the tour. We're really digging it out of the dirt, as you could say, with GolfBet. I joined up in January, and this is a brand that we had as a content share with Action Network dating back to 2020. But this is the year that the PGA Tour has really taken it in house and has launched out on social platforms. And we've created some editorial. We're covering tournaments on site, trying to build out a content hub. It's not a place where you can place bets, but we certainly work with several of our official betting operators and try and parse through information from DraftKings and FanDuel and BetMGM. And the idea is to inform and entertain folks from a betting lens and to hopefully make a little bit of money if you can.
And gambling on the PGA Tour is nothing new in terms of, placing bets on PGA Tour golf. I'm assuming that this process has been a long time in the making. Of course, you just started this, what, 5 months ago? So you're kind of one of the guys who's in charge of getting this going. What was the vision to start this and why it was important?
Yeah, I think that the PGA Tour, as with all the other leagues, they approach with some caution about how they want to do betting, and they want to do it the right way. And I think that's why we've seen this kind of evolve slowly over the last several years. And we definitely have, trust me, we've got meetings talking about 2028 projections and 2030 projections, and what is betting going to look like in the sport of golf. And so much of it, is on the cusp of changing. And we think of a lot of casual fans think of betting on golf as who's going to win the tournament, but there's so many more smaller markets, secondary markets, things that are coming out.
Exactly.
Who's going to hit it closest to the pin on this par three that I'm watching on TV or I'm watching at the golf course, and over under 41 and a half feet on an approach shot, things like that. Those are some micro markets that are going to be coming out with more and more frequency, and I think that are going to allow folks to have a better watching and betting experience.
And it's a new era, so to speak. I mean, adapting to the future of sports, and it's not just golf. I mean, golf is the prototypical sport that would do very well in gambling. Just the fact that time in between shots, people have time to gamble on things and have time to actually think about what's smart for them to gamble on. You can't do that in basketball or baseball or football, a lot of these sports. To me, it just goes to show what you guys see as the future, and it's scary on its face. It's such a new venture to think about doing something so different, but it sounds like it's the right thing to do. You're talking about projections of 2028 or whatever random year it's going to be. I'm sure it's hard for you right now to think about what this brand will be in the future, but what are kind of your goals right now just to make sure that you are gaining interest and you're still doing what you think is right in terms of projecting where this could be? Because I know you can't project exactly where it's going to be in 5 years.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that part of it is just trying to, build the small blocks and have that create a larger picture. But, from us, that where we're trying to differentiate what we're doing in the content sphere is just using our relationships with our official betting operators. A lot of places have, we work with one or we work with this guy or that guy. we have 6 official betting operators at the PGA Tour, and so each one of them offers a different lens, a different perspective, different handle information, different liabilities each week. Maybe Justin Thomas is getting a lot of action at PointsBet, but he's not getting a ton of attention at FanDuel. Why is that? What are some of the ideas that are going into how the odds makers are making the prices, how they're changing them in play once the tournament begins, how they're kind of balancing existing liabilities with who they think is actually going to win a golf tournament or win a secondary market. So that's where, for me, as a golf nerd and as someone that certainly enjoys the betting angle of this, that I like to dig into that and try and understand, how those decisions get made and how they might differ from one place to the other.
That's interesting because I think a lot of people would just assume that, odds are odds. Everyone's got the same odds. And just because FanDuel and DraftKings are two different companies, so you're telling me you'll see seriously different bets on different players? Like they won't average out? Like FanDuel could have something completely different in terms of how many people are betting on, you mentioned Justin Thomas. Justin Thomas on one site and not the other?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends a lot on who you're asking and what part of the tournament, but a lot of this can be weighted by a single or a couple of significant bets, and so that's enough to change what the balance sheet looks like. Where you could have one player that you're not going to have someone at 20 to 1 here and 50 to 1 there, but you could have someone that's maybe he's one of the top 3 in handle or liability at this shop, and he's not in the top 10 at this shop because their information is different. And it's all about, especially, it's different with the major championships, but for the most part, week in, week out on the PGA Tour, you're setting these markets on Monday. The ball goes in the air Thursday morning. That's a short time frame to gather information, to have bets placed, and to be able to react accordingly if you're an odds maker.
And no matter where you're placing bets, I'm sure people are getting very frustrated if they're picking Rory McIlroy lately. Because you look at Rory, everyone's talking about him being in a slump. What's wrong with him? Well, you can tell why. The last 5 stroke play events, Rory's missed 2 cuts. He had 1 top 10. It was at the Arnold Palmer. And no scoring average under 70. Now, here's where I really think we need to dive into here, Will. Is Rory McIlroy really playing worse, or are we just comparing him to Jon Rahm and Scottie Scheffler? Because if you look at their average odds of what people are gambling on, Rahm, Scheffler, and Rory, they're all right there, right around 800 to 900 odds. But then here's the thing about it. Rory is not competing at the level that Rahm and Scheffler are. Rory, you could argue, is competing at the level that Patrick Cantlay is. I had the wrong slide there. Patrick Cantlay is at 1,400. So
Yeah.
the fact that Rory's not putting out that distribution is the frustrating part that I think people are having with Rory right now, that his odds are so low. When are they going to go back up, Will?
Well, I think a couple pieces here. First of all, I was at Quail Hollow last week for the Wells Fargo Championship, and something's amiss. Something is not there. It's not clicking for Rory. He seemed like he was frankly, like he was not having much fun on the golf course. Nearly missed the cut on Friday. Was kind of listless over the weekend. Left very quickly on Sunday. So it was not a great week for him on one of his favorite courses. It was a place that he'd won 3 times before. I think when you look at the odds, you also have to remember the starting point. When you look back at where these, we entered 2023, and you looked at some of the futures markets, Rory was coming off a great year. He was the betting favorite in all 4 majors. So he was starting out ahead of Scheffler, ahead of Rahm, ahead of Cantlay. And so now he's starting to slide. It was from a position of power, essentially. And now he's kind of coming down a little bit. I think that there are 2 factors in play. First of all, it doesn't help that Rahm and Scheffler are winning everything in sight.
Exactly.
That makes that magnifies, Rory's lack of hardware, essentially. It now seems like maybe that T2 at Bay Hill on the 3rd place showing at the match play were more the exception than the rule. Everyone kind of saw those and like, okay, he's going to get it going. We're heading in to the Masters. And then that obviously didn't exactly work out. But also when you look at these markets, remember, people are paying a premium to bet on Rory McIlroy. I've often talked about, you haven't had true odds on Tiger Woods in about 25 years because odds makers haven't had to put a true price out on Tiger's chances in order to attract attention and to get people to bet on him. Same thing with Rory. People look at the sheet and they want to bet Rory. He's going to be one of the top and most popular bets pre-tournament pretty much anytime he tees it up. So there's less of an incentive for odds makers to price him accurately. If maybe he's playing like he should be 12 or 14 to 1, but they're still going to get balanced action on him at 9 or 10 to 1, they're going to price him there.
And when you look at Rory and wanting to bet on him, to me, it seems like if Rory's going to do this and maybe win randomly every once in a while and then kind of, fall off the face of the earth, so to speak, the other 75% of the time, You know who he's becoming? He's becoming like Justin Thomas. And I bring up Justin Thomas because, Will, we saw Justin Thomas's odds hover right around 1,400, 1,200, 1,600 for a long time. What's happened since then? He hasn't won in a year, and he's showing that he's very spotty from time to time. And you won't find him below 2,200. And Max Homa is the same way right now. Look how hot Max Homa was in the last handful of months. He was right down there about a plus 1,000, and now you're not finding him below 2,200. The question I have is, how long are odds makers going to have Rory at these astronomically low odds, just assuming that he's going to go back to the Rory of 2012 and 2014? Because you can make the strong argument that that Rory is gone. He's in his mid 30s. That Rory doesn't exist, and a new Rory is here whose odds have to go down. When is that going to be?
Yeah, I mean, well, Roy just turned 34. That's not exactly 46 in golf years, but I do see your point there, where he's also not a 22-year-old kid at the same time. So I think the next 6 weeks are going to be very telling. He's going to have the PGA Championship, U.S. Open. He's probably going to play Memorial, and he's going to defend his title at the RBC Canadian Open. After and heading into LA Country Club for that U.S. Open, we're going to know a lot about where Rory's game is. I mean, right now, if you're a golfer and you want to plan a crisis of conscience or whatever, you want it to be in October or November. You don't want it to be in April and May. There's a lot of golf that's going to happen that's very important in the next few weeks, and so it's going to be very telling if he's able to rebound. I mean, he can make a fool out of me in 10 days and go and win the PGA Championship by 3 shots at Oak Hill, and it'll be like, I don't know what I'm talking about. Which, trust me, it's happened before. But I think that really, as we get into that, especially that double dip of the defending title at the Canadian Open, turning right around to the U.S. Open at LA Country Club, that's going to be the pivot point. I think that you're still going to see odds and prices that you're used to seeing on Rory through those events. And it's really, if he continues to no-show after those events, that's when I think you could see him pivot to maybe 15, 18, 20 to 1.
And that's exactly the way he looks at it. He's an athlete. He's a competitor. He knows he has a long way to go, whether he feels good about his game or not. But here's the deal that I want to highlight, because is Rory really playing worse than he has in the last handful of years? Let's throw out that huge stretch from 2012 to call it 2017 when he was just so good and you could pick him in a random event and he could win it and nobody would be surprised. I mean, last year, up this point through the Wells Fargo, the new year going through the Wells Fargo at the beginning of May, the last 3 years, including this year, Will, you look at these numbers, Rory really is no different. He had that one win at Quail Hollow that you mentioned 2 years ago, but he missed 3 cuts at that point in that year. He only had one top five. That was his only top five, was that win. So you look at all of these 3 years, there's really nothing different to Rory's game. So that makes me wonder, I think we're putting Rory on this pedestal that, maybe he doesn't have what he used to have. And like you said, we got to wait and see, because I know he wants to prove everybody wrong.
I do think there's something to be said for, Rory's hot streaks have tended to be in the latter half of the summer. You think back to 2014, he won those back-to-back majors.
Definitely.
At the end of the year, a lot of his best work seems to be in June, July, August, September, in that range, as opposed to some other players that get hot in the West Coast and they can't sustain it through the other parts of the season. Everyone has that purple patch that really works for them. But I also think that this still goes back to the perception, the what have you done for me lately phenomenon, because Jon Rahm and Scotty Scheffler are going and they're playing so well and they're so efficient and productive at winning these big events. Scheffler cruises at the Players, Rahm gets his, Masters green jacket, everything is kind of working in their direction. And you feel like Rory is the third part of that big three of, I feel like we've had 14 different iterations of the big
Yeah.
three in the last 10 years. And this has been the 2023 edition, right? It was supposed to be Rahm, Scheffler, McIlroy. They were all priced right together in those first few events. And Rory, it feels like he's just not holding up his end of the bargain a lot because of how well those other two are playing.
The PGA Championship is Rory's jam. We know that. That might be the place where he can get back on track. And of course, we'll talk more about that coming up here in a little bit. But this week, focusing on the AT&T Byron Nelson. And this is the kind of event, now granted, it's mashed in between a bunch of designated events. So the field this year is not what it used to be. But the odds makers clearly have Scotty Scheffler far and away as the favorite, with Tyrrell Hatton and Jason Day, the next two top contributors here, nowhere near Scotty Scheffler. Scotty Scheffler is basically getting into Jon Rahm Mexican Open, the Mexico Open territory, with how low those numbers are. Is Scotty Scheffler even close, Will, to being somebody you should pick this week at Byron Nelson, just from a betting standpoint? I'm not talking about fantasy and what his value worth would be there and if it would be worth it. From a betting at plus 450, is that worth it if you're only making a couple of bets?
Well, I mean, I think that was an apt parallel to Rahm at Mexico. We just saw that a couple weeks ago, where he was, shorter than plus 300 at a lot of places, and that one almost worked, right? It's not something that I think you can make a habit of trying to bet outrights. In that plus 250 to 300 range, but Rahm nearly, Tony Finau doesn't play that week. I think Rahm is cruising to another win in Mexico. So, I think that it's a fair price. I think Scotty Scheffler is clearly the best player in this field. I question whether or not, especially with the PGA Championship next week, it's one where maybe his focus is a little bit in Texas and a little bit at Oak Hill, especially a course that he doesn't really know that well. So I'm leery of betting the chalk in these sort of situations, both before and after a major championship. So I would probably steer clear a little bit on the board, but that's to say, it's no slouch on Sheffield. Given what he's done this year, given what he's done basically over the last 12 months, it definitely makes sense to see him priced where he is in a field that now is absent Jordan Spieth. It seemed like it was going to be, 1A and 1B at the top, then Spieth has an injury, and now Scheffler's left alone.
Smartest bettors always go with best value, best odds of getting some money, getting some return. I'm going to show you my three best bets to make money here in a minute. I want to get yours, whether it's the winner, some prop bet, finishing position. What are you looking at in specific at the AT&T Byron Nelson?
I think I'm going veterans. I think
Yeah.
that this is a week where you could maybe see, it's a odd dynamic because this is the third year that you've had this tournament at TPC Craig Ranch. Cage Lee has won each of the last two. It's going to be an absolute shootout. I mean, he shot 51 under over the last 2 years to win this tournament. So I think that someone that's gaining a lot of attention that I kind of agree with is Matt Kuchar, that has been trending in
Yeah.
the right direction and can play pretty well in some of these Texas conditions. And another player that maybe not for the win, but someone that I would look for as a top 10 bet is Jimmy Walker, who is absolutely off the radar. Maybe 6-8 months ago, has had a tough time since that PGA Championship win, battling Lyme disease, way outside the top 500 in the world rankings. He has started to play a little bit better, including last week at Quail Hollow. I think maybe another win is in the mix. He's getting up there in age, but I think that in the interim, he's definitely someone as a Texas resident that I would look to contend. He's going to take this event seriously, and I think that this is somewhere maybe if he's T22 entering the final round, he could put together a 63, 64 and crack that top 10.
I am so glad that you said you're looking at veterans because it makes me feel like I am not crazy at all because I've got on my best three bets, I've got two veterans here, and I almost picked Matt Kuchar. Ryan Palmer has been bad this year, and I mean really bad. So why in the world would I pick him? Well, I'm looking at the way this guy plays in Texas, his affinity for Texas golf as an Amarillo guy. He has one top 10 in the last 2 years. You know where that top 10 was? It was a
I'm going
tie
to
for
guess the
fifth.
Lone Star State.
That's right. It was a tie for fifth. So why can't Ryan Palmer get top 20 for plus 410? Ryan Palmer top 20. I love that bet. Just the fact that it's plus 410 and nothing below that. Adam Scott, do you realize has not played a non-designated event all year? He hasn't. This is
Yeah,
his
did not.
It's his first one that it's
Wow.
non-designated, which means the competition is going to be, let's face it, a lot less. And Adam Scott tends to play this golf that we saw it as early as last year, back-to-back good performances in the playoffs because he starts to feel good and play good. Adam Scott finally started playing well last week at Wells Fargo against a really good field. I like Adam Scott. What do you think about Adam Scott this week? Just top 10.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely a good angle. It was funny. I actually had a chance to talk with him last week at
Uh,
Quail Hollow, and he had a great line where he said, "I play okay every week, and okay doesn't really get you anywhere on the PGA Tour. That he needs to have those breakthrough weeks. A lot of times it starts with him with the putter. He still had a couple of very short misses last week at the Wells Fargo, but he was right there in the mix in that top five, entering the final round on a very difficult course. It's going to be a different test, a different challenge this week where it's going to be a birdie fest. You're going to go out knowing that you have to shoot 65, 66 to keep pace with the field. But absolutely, given his tee to green game looked like last week at Quail Hollow, I think he has what it takes.
And if you're playing okay at Heritage and Wells Fargo
Right.
and API and you play okay at TPC Craig Ranch, I think that T35 easily turns into a T10, and that plus 360, I love that. I have Will
Yeah.
Gordon on here because I'm sure you're like me and a lot of other people who bet where me personally, I try as much as I can to block out the noise of what other people are telling me. Every time I do this, I'm saying, I shouldn't have done this. I got talked into this. I'm getting talked into Will Gordon by other people. I don't know if it's a good idea. He's the kind of guy who really hasn't been great at all most of the year, but he has shown glimpses of having two or three really good rounds, and then a fourth round just derails him. What do you think about Will Gordon?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Consistency is the key for a player like that in somewhat of that mid tier of guys that have the talent, haven't won yet on the PGA Tour, but they have shown glimpses of whether it's 18 holes, 36 holes, and you kind of wonder can
Right.
they put 72 together. I think with a top 20 market, you built yourself a little bit of a buffer there. You have some margin for error. You don't need him to be lights out for all four rounds, but I think he's definitely among that group that has high upside of you're not going to you have to be able to battle through miscuts and T57s, knowing that eventually at a plus 260 price, maybe 2 out of 3 weeks might be a little off, but you're going to on that one that you hit. If you cash a plus 260, it's going to net out pretty positively for your bankroll.
And I think the people who want to keep betting Will Gordon are playing the odds, so to speak, of assuming that one day that 77 in that fourth round is going to turn into a 72. It's not going to keep happening every single time. One day he's going to put four okay rounds together and maybe cash out on a bet. So PGA Championships coming up next week. There's so many different things we could talk about with it. What I want to focus on, kind of staying with this betting angle, Will, is do we as betters kind of take our internal perceptions of what we personally feel about players' ability to win and do well under pressure just because of our personal views on them? And do we let that dictate how we bet on people? What do you think about that philosophy?
Yeah, I think a little bit. I think in team sports that there's that maximum of are you betting, the name on the front or the name on the back, and sometimes that plays into it. With golf, it is hard to get away from those preconceptions,
Yeah.
especially when you start getting into week in week out or even the major championships where all of the players involved, and you say, hey, this is a guy that I like to back. He's due, or this is a guy that burned me 4 weeks ago, and he's dead to me. So I think that definitely is in play sometimes.
So, with that said, I want to play a game with you here. Betting on
Okay.
the PGA Championship next week. I'm giving you three players. None of
Okay.
them have won a major championship. And I'm showing you how they've done in majors, top fives. Player one has five top fives in majors. Player two has none. Player three has five top fives in majors. Then going PGA Tour wins. Player one's never won on the PGA Tour. Player two has 6 wins. Player three has 7 wins. You're with me here.
I'm here. I'm in. Yeah.
2023, all three guys have played pretty good golf. They haven't
Hmm.
won this year. None of them have won this year, but they have a lot of top fives. They're knocking on the door, and they're all in the top 10 and shots gained total. They're all great ball strikers who know how to play good golf, and their ball striking is phenomenal. Now, I know who these three players are, Will. I don't want to bet on any of these three guys at the PGA Championship because I know of my internal feelings about how I believe these guys are going to play.
Hmm.
What do you think about each of these players? I'm sure you could probably guess if you took some time. You could probably
Right.
guess at least who one of these guys is.
Yeah. So player two is out for me. I feel like player two is probably Max Homa. And the big key for me is no top fives in a major. I need someone to have been in the mix before I really feel confident about betting them to win a major championship. And winning on the PGA Tour is well and good, and that's a huge key to it. I think that no PGA wins for player one is somewhat of a disqualifier. Sometimes you have that with an asterisk. You saw a guy like Matt Fitzpatrick last year, who yes, he hadn't won on the PGA Tour, but he had won a lot in Europe and he had played on Ryder Cups and he knew that cauldron essentially. So I'm definitely leading to of the three. I'm going to take player three. But the big red flag for me is player two having no top fives in majors. I think you need to get in the mix. You have to feel that pressure on Sunday because it is different those weeks than the other 48.
Do you feel the same about player one just for the fact that he's been knocking on the door but's never done it ever, let alone in a major and no PGA wins?
Yeah, but I think I would rather have someone that has been in the mix at a major
Mm.
and hasn't won than someone that has won a few times and hasn't been in the mix at a major. I think it's just different, and so that's I like three of these, but if you give me a choice between player one and player two, I'm going to go player one.
Player 1 over player 2 and player 3
Yeah,
over all 3 of them. You want me to reveal who it is?
go for it. Let's do it.
You were right on Max Homa. That was probably pretty obvious. Multiple wins on tour and 0 top 5s. You knew that one.
Well, and Fleetwood, makes sense because it's like the Fitzpatrick asterisk, right? He has no PGA Tour wins, but he's a decorated guy. He's played in Ryder Cups. He's won a bunch in Europe. So I view Tommy Fleetwood differently than, let's say, Cameron Young, who's
Yep.
another popular guy that also hasn't won yet on the PGA Tour. And so if you're asking me which one would I rather take to have an outright within the sitting T4 heading into Sunday, I'm going to take Tommy Fleetwood over Cam Young.
You would.
Shoffley, yeah, yeah, I would. I think that Fleetwood has been more inconsistent. I mean, Cam Young has been better over the last 18 months, but I think in that cauldron, I would trust Fleetwood a little bit more, given how well I've seen him play with those performances. So Shoffley is someone that I feel like should have four majors by now. I don't know
I know.
everything. Every time I look at him on paper, I'm like, yeah, this is absolutely going to be his week. He's got the gold medal. He's won so many times in the PGA Tour. He's certainly an accomplished player, but it's something where, yeah, I feel like he's definitely going to get one soon, and I'm surprised he hasn't gotten one yet.
What you said about Tommy Fleetwood is exactly the point I'm trying to make about our internal perceptions of somebody because I actually feel differently than you do about Tommy Fleetwood.
Yeah,
I feel like there's something about his game where he's not able to get over that mental hump. I don't want to pick Tommy Fleetwood to win. If I'm picking him to do top 5, top 10, and I'm doing just random bets of prop bets, sure, I'll do it.
yeah,
I don't think Tommy Fleetwood's ever going to win a major, let alone a
okay,
PGA event. That's my internal perception. I could be dead wrong. And the fact that his numbers are so good and I don't believe in him, I'm not letting myself pick him. That's my problem. That's
right.
my perception issue. With Xander Schauffele, this is very interesting because y- you could, Will. Do you think you could make the argument that Xander Schauffele is kind of in that same mold of Tommy Fleetwood of maybe doubting if he's ever going to get it done on a Sunday in a major?
I mean, I think that there's more confidence in Shoffley getting it done than Fleetwood. That being said, we're a few days away from him not getting it done at Wells Fargo when it seemed like everything was in place for him to run past Wyndham Clark. But yeah, I think if you ask most people who's going to win more majors in their career, Xander or Tommy Fleetwood, most people are going to go with Xander. Yeah,
That's an excellent point. So PGA Championship is next week. Of course, so many guys, stars who haven't won in a while, are trying to get their first win in a very long time. Of course, Jordan Spieth is out at the AT&T Byron Nelson. He's got a wrist injury. He's probably doubtful for the PGA Championship. He's trying to get that elusive career Grand Slam. It would be at the PGA Championship. One final game here, Will, before I let you go. I've got 4 stars on this board here for you. 4 guys who know how to win big. They've been superstars in the past. All of them, maybe except for Patrick Cantlay, you could argue are falling down that board, and people are forgetting about Colin Morikawa and Justin Thomas and maybe even Jordan Spieth. Patrick Cantlay, not sure if people are forgetting about him, but none of these guys has won in 2023. We all want a big star. We all want people to contend with Scheffler and Rahm. On this list, who do you see getting back on top or near the top and being a star again?
I think it's of the four. I'm going to go with Cantlay. I think the one that could surprise randomly is probably Morikawa. He really disappeared last week at Quail Hollow. He just was no showed, and
Oh, yeah.
it's surprising to see how far he's fallen. Spieth, as you mentioned, the injury is honestly a significant concern. I don't know how long it's going to be. We're still not sure. Maybe he shows up at Oak Hill, but it doesn't seem great for him to be 100% next week. And Justin Thomas is another one, kind of in that Shoffley bucket for me, of someone that I've been high on in recent months, and it just
Yeah.
is not quite there. And he talked openly about he's putting a lot of pressure on himself to try and get things on track. And one thing that really stood out to me, he made a change last week to aim point with the putter. He was 152nd in strokes gained putting this season, entering last week. I mean, we're not talking about usually a guy of his caliber. A bad category is I'm 30th, I'm 50th, I'm 70th. There were 150 guys better than him on the greens this year.
Yeah.
I mean, his putting has been a huge liability. That's going to be the thing that he's going to have to turn around if he's going to be able to contend once again. But for me, I'm going to wait and see on that. And of the four, I think Patrick Cantley gets a trophy before the others.
That is the crazy, unpredictable thing about golf, man. That we're talking so much about betting and fantasy, just the unknown of Colin Morikawa in specific. I mean,
Yeah,
who was to say that Colin Morikawa doesn't figure it out and show what he showed 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and just be a top three player in the world? I mean, nobody would be surprised. But right
right.
now, you're kind of proving the point that we don't see it happening. And because we don't see it happening right now, we probably feel like it will never happen. And you have no reason to believe why something would happen bad for somebody. No rhyme or reason for saying, oh, why is he in a slump? Why did he get out of the slump? It's just so unpredictable. And that's maybe the exciting thing about betting on golf because you have no idea if you're going to do well or not from a given week.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely blank slate on a Monday morning. It's for better or worse. You're going to have to make some new choices and see how they turn out.
So, Will, thanks so much for coming on here live on Find the Fairway. We're about a third of the way through the 2023 part of the schedule. What do you got coming up here? I know it's very busy. We've had a ton of designated events already in the rearview mirror. We've got so many majors coming up and more designated events. What are you looking forward to seeing the next 5, 6 months on the PGA Tour? What's piquing your interest?
Yeah, I think I'm going to blink and we're going to be at East Lake. I mean, this is what as a golf fan you really live for. It's going to be great. We've got three majors coming up, and then the FedEx Cup playoffs. As you said, a ton of designated events. We're doing planning a golf bet for the Memorial Tournament, which is going to be another huge field in a few weeks, and then we're going to get into a new section of the fall where it's going to be a little bit different than what we're used to seeing, and heading into 2024 where we're getting back onto the calendar seasonality that we haven't had on the PGA Tour in about 10 years. So definitely an exciting time and an exciting adventure here at GolfBet as we continue to try and find different angles to elevate and discuss around some of these events.
And I know the entire golf world is watching you guys at the PGA Tour and that golf bet brand, following you on social media and looking at what you guys are focused on each week on the PGA Tour. Will Gray on Find the Fairway Live. Will, thanks so much.
I'll get to be with you, Chris.
Yeah.